Hello, if you're following along in the series, you know that we've got our solution images uploaded to our Azure Container Registry. But how do we know those images are safe and can be trusted? I'm going to show how you can scan your images for vulnerabilities and get recommendations on how to remediate those vulnerabilities. Please see the URL on your screen for more in our Container Offers course and for hands-on labs and sample code. We're going to be using Microsoft Defender for Cloud to scan images, but you can use other scanning software if you like. We're not going to demo all of the many capabilities of Microsoft Defender for Cloud, as this is a very robust tool and has a lot of features, but you'll see the basic steps to using Defender to see how we can scan our Azure Container Registries to find vulnerabilities in our images. Let's talk about some of the things we're going to cover in this module. First, we're going to actually ensure you can use Microsoft Defender for Cloud in scanning your ACRs. And then, of course, we're going to go ahead and scan for vulnerabilities. And we'll find some. I'll tell you that right up front. And then we're going to patch those vulnerabilities. All right, let's kick off this demo. Now, the first thing we want to ensure is that Microsoft Defender for protecting our containers is actually enabled. So to do that, let's go to Microsoft Defender for Cloud in our leftmost menu and come down to Getting Started. Under Getting Started, we're going to select the subscription that we want to activate Defender on. And here we are on the Defender plan page. This page allows us to activate different aspects of Defender depending on what services we would like Defender to be active on. In our case, we want to ensure that Defender is active for containers. So if you have a Kubernetes option here, that's the old way of protecting your containers. Now it's just called containers. And when you select this option, you're protecting not just your containers in your Azure Container Registries, but also your Kubernetes cores. So what does that look like? Well, if we pull up the advantages that we see, the plan details, you can pause the video and read this, but the number one thing we're interested in for our demonstration today is that it will scan for vulnerabilities in images stored in our ACRs. Now, the last thing we want to do is ensure that it's toggled on, which it is in my case. It takes a couple of minutes after you turn it on for the scans to actually take place. So I've already toggled on my containers option. Now let's head over to our ACR and see what we've got in our repositories. Now, I've actually uploaded a new image for Vote Front. You've seen me use this repository name in the past, and we're using the tag 1.00, and this is the image that I forecasted would have some problems with it. So let's go check out those problems by heading down to Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and we'll look at our inventory. In our inventory, you might have far more resources protected than I do. In that case, you might want to come up to resource types. And in our case, again, we're looking just, of course, for container registries, of which I have one. So there it is, our DSACR00. I'm going to click into that. In this case, it's telling us that the container registry has images that need vulnerability resolution. So let's go in and take a look at what's wrong with that image. It turns out there's a lot wrong with this image. And I created it off of an old base Docker image. That image happens to hold an instance of MariaDB. We can filter on that. We can filter on Debian, not much use since everything on this screen shows Debian. We can search on GMP. We have one vulnerability associated with GMP. Let's have a deeper look at this vulnerability. I'll select it, and up comes a tab on the right that shows us more information about this vulnerability. Notice that the severity is high, but even more important is this data, the CVSS 3.0 base score. This base score of 7.5 means that this image will not pass certification in our container offer. Our container offer moves into a certification stage after we publish it, and in our case, this particular image will fail that certification. In fact, any score of 7.0 or higher on any security finding will fail certification. So we need to be very careful about this score and ensure that everything is 6.9 or lower. So now let's take a look at the CVE that's actually behind this particular vulnerability. It opens in a new tab, and we can browse information about this vulnerability, of course. And we also have links to information about updates and patch information and about downloading patches to fix this vulnerability. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you about this vulnerability, if we go down to the bottom and I select the affected resources, up comes the image that has this vulnerability. Now, there are two things that we want to pay attention to, the digest and the tags. The digest helps us definitively identify the image that has the vulnerability. Of course, tags do too, but we might delete an image of 1.0.0 and upload a new one. In fact, we want to be looking at the digest just to make sure that we're ridding ourselves of the affected image. What are we going to do about this? Well, the first thing I'll do, just as a best practice, is to come into my ACR, come down to my repositories, and delete this image. After all, we don't really want our images hanging around when they have these kind of vulnerabilities. So what will we do to fix this problem? Here we are in our Docker file we used to create the images that had all of those vulnerabilities. I happen to have known that the 3.6 version of this image had all of those vulnerabilities that I wanted to show you. So let's upgrade to the latest, and I happen to know that that's 3.10. So we'll see if we can get rid of those vulnerabilities in this way. In addition, I could run the following two commands, apt-get update and apt-get upgrade, as part of my Docker build process. Instead, I'm going to show you a different way to get into your container so that you can run those updates. That'll update many of the applications and packages inside your container. The first thing we need to do, though, is build this Docker image. And notice that I'm going to use the tag version of 1.0.1. Of course, we're no longer working with our 0.0 image, and we don't want to upload that to our ACR because it is in fact going to be a different image. So let's go ahead and build it. And after we've built it, I'll just clear our screen and we'll run it. There we go. Now let's make sure that our image is running, and there it is, it's up and going. So we know we've got an image that is at least going to serve our application for us. Now let's remote into that image by using the following command. Now we're going to use the container ID instead of this placeholder container, of course. So the last command here, bash, ensures that we're going to be running bash when we get into the container, which we now are. Now the first thing we're going to do is run apt update, which updates, of course, the apt application itself. The next thing we'll do is run apt upgrade, which means we'll use apt to upgrade all of those packages we talked about just a moment ago. It's going to confirm, I'll select yes, and we're off and running. Next, we need to commit the changes so that they're retained in the image. And to do that, we'll go to a new command line, bump it up just a bit. On this command line, we'll go ahead and commit the changes that we've made into our image. So there we go. We're going to run this command. Now, before we do, actually, I'm going to need the container image. So now I'll grab that container ID. We'll, of course, replace container in that command with it. And we are committing the changes to the 1.0.1 image. And that's now done. We can head back over to our other command line and exit the container. By the way, with this command, you can note that the container is still running. We didn't shut down the container by exiting from it. With that in mind, let's go ahead and shut it down just to be clean and clear for our next set of commands. Now, the next thing we'll do is push it up to our Azure Container Registry. To do that, I'll run the login to our container registry, followed by a push command that will get our new image up there. So let's go ahead and push our new image up there. And great, our image is now in our ACR. Now, of course, through the magic of time travel, you didn't have to wait as long as I did for that image to get pushed up there. Let's hop back over to our Azure portal. Here we are in the Azure portal inside Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Let's jump into our container registry and see what we learn. Well, the warning or the high vulnerability recommendation is that container registry images should have their vulnerabilities resolved. And of course, we know this from last time. Let's go ahead and click into this recommendation. Note, this is a recommendation. It's not an actual error. So let's jump into our vulnerability findings. And it's worth noting that you should let this sit for a while, because the push of our image up to our ACR is what triggers Microsoft Defender to run. That run can take a few minutes to finish. So we did take a few minutes to let Microsoft Defender do its thing inside this demonstration video. And you can see under our security checks, we have absolutely no vulnerabilities left. This is great for us because this no result finding means that we're going to be able to pass certification for our image going through the marketplace. All right, so what did we learn? Well, we saw that we can enable Microsoft Defender for Cloud to scan our ACR images. And we actually did so and saw the results in vulnerabilities that were reported by Microsoft Defender for Cloud. We mentioned that a vulnerability score of 7 or greater will cause your image to fail certification for your container offer. So you want to make sure that all of your vulnerability findings are of a score less than 7. This means they're probably warnings, not errors. And finally, we did patch a vulnerability with a new image. So you saw how our vulnerability warnings actually went away. Thank you for joining us for another video from Mastering the Marketplace, the learning library where technologists go to get their offer on the Microsoft Marketplace. For more videos, hands-on labs, and sample code, find us at aka.ms/Mastering the Marketplace.